Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Congratulations. We did it. We made it through another week. And now is a time where we kick up our feet, pour a drink or two, and watch how the woke left are actively trying to destroy America by integrating their nonsense into every major institution in this country. Fun times. I think it's important that we have fun and take a lighthearted look at this stuff when we're learning about it. Otherwise, it's really painful to watch. And so we do it with drinks and friends on Friday afternoon. That is what happy hour is. It's when we both eat our vegetables and have our dessert at exactly the same time. And I do have some great beers today that are absolutely dessert inspired beers. I need to shut off my email because I'm getting notifications every 2 seconds because I get way too much email. Far too much email. Jan asks, is that a Jeremy hoodie? No, it is not. This is a Joshua Smith hoodie. Joshua Smith, if you don't know, is the vice chair of the Libertarian National Party. He is also the host of a great show called Break the Cycle on YouTube. If you are interested in libertarian related things, I definitely recommend you check that out. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about teaching about race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation in, wait for it, K through 8 history. This is real. This was uploaded to YouTube back in March 7th, 2022. It has 38 views. So this video today across all of the platforms that I'm streaming it on will get more views in a single day than it has gotten since it was uploaded to YouTube. And I've always told you guys, I think that the best content comes on these little channels that have like no views from anywhere. And that's not a value judgment on the channel. I actually think that these channels are incredibly valuable because they provide us that very, very, very special insight into the things that these people say when they think that no one else is listening. So, this is from the University, or excuse me, not University of California. That was my mistake. California State University. Not really that much different. This is from California State University, Monterey Bay, and this is actually a course at California State University. This is a class from the course. And you can see this guy's got other classes on this channel as well. We're not going to do that today. I do have one pulled up. I have another one pulled up that he did called Teaching LGBTQ plus Lessons for Teachers. That might be a future happy hour stream. That one's only half an hour long. This one is an hour and a half. And so what we do on happy hours is we watch the full video. We watch everything they say from start to finish, and we have beer because beer makes life easier when you're watching this type of content. And we talk about it, and we analyze it, and we make fun of it, and we mock it relentlessly. But most importantly, we learn. We learn exactly what these people are doing because they will tell you exactly and precisely what they're doing. You just need to listen for it when they do it. That's all it is. When they tell you something, listen to them and then believe them because they're giving you away their battle plan. And if we don't know their battle plan, that means we can't fight back against them. So that is what we're going to be watching today. A real live college class about how to teach sexuality to minors in history class. What could possibly go wrong? Well, guys, please mount that like button for me. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Actively Unwoke is my second channel on YouTube. I also want to say hello to everyone watching on Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, Gitter, all the other places that I'm streaming at the moment. The chat is best on YouTube, but if you don't mind, if you don't want to participate in the chat, you can stay on one of the other channels. That's totally fine too. Just a couple quick announcements before we get started. We have a movie night coming up on Sunday at 8 p.m. in my supporter Discord. We're going to be watching Poltergeist. Perfect Halloween movie, one of the classics. If you haven't seen Poltergeist, the original, not the remake. We don't do remakes on my channel or in my supporter community unless they're really good, unless there's like a really, really good excuse. But most of the time, you got to go with the original. We're going to be watching that on Sunday at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. I'll tell you how to get access to the supporter Discord in just 1 second. We are doing regular movie nights. Every other week is the usual schedule, but we've actually been doing them on weekly through the month of October because there's so many great Halloween movies to watch. So we picked it up a little bit, and thank you to Jennifer, who has been hosting these movie nights. I really do appreciate it. We also have a book club coming up in a little over a month. And I'm really excited about this book club. This book club is definitely not going to get me in trouble in any way. We're going to read the Unabomber's Manifesto. Definitely won't get me in trouble in any way. I want to see what it says. A lot of people, when I said, I put out on Twitter, I want to do an extremist book club. What do I need to put on the list? The Unabomber's Manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, was the #1 recommended book that people wanted me to put on the list of extremist books to read. The other #1 recommended one was Mein Kampf, and I was like, I'm not like opposed to reading it. I actually do own a copy of it. I have actually read it before. I read it like a long time ago. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying I read it. Um, I'm not actually opposed to doing that. But like, can you imagine the trouble I would get in for hosting a Mein Kampf fucking book club? Can you imagine the uproar that would occur over that? Maybe we'll do a whole extremist series at some point. I'm not really sure if this is going to turn into a series or if we're just going to do this one, but we are going to be reading the Unabomber Manifesto. We are going to be talking about it on December 3rd in my supporter community, and you are welcome to join us if that is what you would like to do. How you get access to my supporter community is you go to activelyunwoke.com/support. There are a number of ways that you can support me. This isn't actually even a comprehensive list, but this is the list that's on the website for right now. First way is you can join my Patreon. My Patreon is relatively new. I recently expanded onto Patreon not too long ago. I haven't really done a whole heck of a lot of promotion around it, but the option does exist. I went to Patreon because I like the features of the site. I also like that they can do things that other platforms can't do, like provide you with some cool merchandise and stuff like that. You can support me on Patreon anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to $250 a month, depending on what types of perks you want and how valuable you think my content is on any given day. You can get some cool stuff, and you can check out Patreon for that to find out more about the perks and things like that. If you don't want to join Patreon, totally get it. Some of you have a thing about Patreon. Patreon does occasionally cancel people. I'm not actually worried about that, but I understand why people would be. For everyone else, Locals is going to be the best place for you to support me. Locals is also where you're going to get the most community interaction. It's where you're going to have the most interaction from me in my Locals and my Patreon community. We do 2 Zoom calls every single week. These are private. These are unrecorded. These are only available to my supporters. They last anywhere from 3 hours all the way up to 5.5 hours. So I'm spending a significant amount of time with my supporters in a private setting where we can just hang out, chat about whatever's going on. These calls are really, really great. There's always a whole bunch of people on them. We talk about a wide variety of topics. They are the thing that has kept me sane in a world of insanity, and I think you'll love them too. You can get those by joining Patreon or Locals, but Locals is kind of where those calls came out of. Lastly, the option here is Substack. I do have multiple Substacks because I really want writing to be a key part of what I'm doing moving forward. I like writing. I think I'm a pretty decent writer. I've really practiced at it and worked at it. I have a bunch of Substacks that I'm either have already launched or I'm going to be working on launching with a variety of different topic areas. The current ones that I'm doing the most work on are Actively Unwoke and the Red Pill Diaries. I also do have Art of the Trigger. I just don't have that monetized yet, so that's why it's not on the list. But if you are enjoying all of my Substack articles are always free, 100% free. But if you appreciate the work that goes into it, you do have the option of becoming a paid supporter at $5 a month, $50 a year to support the work I'm doing. And if you appreciate the content, I would certainly appreciate your donation to keep me independent, to make sure that I have the time to be able to churn out content, because as you know, writing does take time. It's just the way it goes. But I do love it, and I've been loving the feedback that I've been getting lately on my writing, and I really do appreciate that. All right. So that's how you can support my work. When you support my work, you're going to get access to book club. You're going to get access to movie night. You're going to get access to the supporter Discord. You're going to get access to all sorts of fun things. That's all I'm really going to say about that for the moment, because we got business to tend to, guys. Now, the first order of business before we get into today's video is that I need a drink. Because it's happy hour, of course, and so it wouldn't be happy hour if I didn't have a really fancy craft beer. Now, today, apparently, the theme for craft beer is dessert. I was in a cheesecake beer type of mood for some reason. So I got some good beers. Let me show you which ones I have. And per happy hour tradition, you're going to get to vote on which beer I start with first. So hang on. All right, I got my 4-pack. I'm not going to drink all 4 beers on the stream. You just get 4 because the ring comes in 4, so it's nice and even. It makes sense. Let me show you guys what I have today. All right, let's see. The first one I have, you guys know raspberry is like one of my favorites. I love raspberry so much. It's like basically my favorite flavor. I would have raspberry anything almost anytime. And so when I saw a raspberry beer with a skull on it, I was like, that's my beer. This is called Super Raspy, and this is a sour ale with raspberry. And this is not just a normal sour ale with raspberry. This is an 8.3 alcohol content sour ale with raspberry. It is a limited release from 6 Point Brewery, and it says a raspberry sour with superpowers, a lush, juicy burst of tart raspberry blitzes the taste buds like an electric blast of berry flavor and aroma. And super raspy, loads of raspberries and a touch of milk sugar have their powers combined for a mouthwatering, super tasty brew. That's super raspy. Oh, ah! Hang on, it fell on the floor. Hang on one sec. Saved it. I was sitting Indian style in my chair, so it was getting problematic. Okay, next up. Bing. Next up, I have an ice cream sour ale. I have no idea what this means. This is from Blade Brewing. And does it have a yes, it has a description. It is called Split. It is an ice cream sour ale. Is a banana split a sandwich? Have you had your banana bun split in two with ice cream, nuts, whipped cream, and cherries as your filling? The answer is no, but it still tastes amazing. We brought the banana split flavor to you in beer form. The ingredients are standard with chocolate, soft serve ice cream, and banana, with the flavors are absolutely bonkers in the best way. That is banana split. All right, our next one is going to be Mind Over Matter. This is from Magnify Brewing Company, and this is a pumpkin spice cheesecake double chocolate milk stout. I don't think this has a description. It's just lactose cheesecake, vanilla, cocoa nibs, and pumpkin spice. Pumpkin cheesecake, pumpkin chocolate cheesecake, excuse me. And then the last one, this is our Halloween beer just for you guys. Vampire Death Wish. Come on, look at that can. I had to buy that beer. This is from Four Quarters Brewing, and it is a sour ale with sour cherries and blood orange. And it doesn't have a description. So, sour ale with sour cherries and blood orange. I bet that's going to be super, super, super red. All right. Per happy hour tradition, you guys get to vote in the chat on which one I start with. Let me put that poll in the chat. If I can get my mouse over there. There we go. The poll is in the chat on YouTube. Please register your votes. And while you're doing that, please mount that like button for me. Please subscribe on whatever platform you're watching on. We do happy hours on Friday at 5 p.m. You are welcome to bring your own drinks as well to happy hour. Let us know what you're drinking. If you're drinking anything fun in the chat, these presentations are usually, well, let's just say much easier to get through when we have a cocktail or two. Yeah, people are having trouble choosing today. I'll give you guys about another minute for that. And let me just say hello. Oh, God, it's so close. Oh, my God, they're all tied. So I just want to say hello again to people checking in on Odyssey, Rockfin. Let me see. There we go. Now I'm actually broadcasting on Rockfin. I forgot to hit the button earlier. Getter, all sorts of platforms. Too many platforms for one person. All right, guys, last chance to vote. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Looks like you guys are going with raspberry today. See, I really played up the raspberry with the skull, didn't I? You guys are like, she's drinking the 8.3% beer first. All right, sour raspy it is. Let's see what this looks like. I bet it's going to be beautiful. I bet it's going to be beautiful. Oh, wow. It's not red at all, is it? Oh, wow. That wasn't what I expected. It does look nice and creamy, though, doesn't it? Oh, it looks so light. Let's see. I might have to settle for a second. Look at the head on that. It's always good to have a good head on beers because that's where all the aroma comes from. When you're drinking beer, guys, it's not just about like chugging the beer, especially when you're drinking like good craft beer. You got to savor the beer. That's why I drink beer out of a wine glass. I like the feeling of it. I like that it's a little bit fancier. Leonardas is 8% strong. Yes. Normal beer is anywhere but like 4.5 to 5.5 alcohol content. So 8% is pretty strong. Look, it's getting redder as it sits. But always like, if you're gonna have a fancy beer, savor the fancy beer. This is where all the aroma is. Enjoy the aroma. It does smell like raspberry. I'm just gonna let that settle for a minute before we take a sip because I don't want a mouthful of foam. Not today. Not today, Satan. All right, guys, let's get started with happy hour. Let me just pull up the Chrome. There we go. Share audio. Well, that cider donut one, the one that was 6.9, wasn't that the one that was aged in a bourbon barrel? That's cider donut, fucking cider, man. That was good. I was looking for that the other day. I couldn't find it anywhere. It's so good. The problem with beer companies nowadays is they release the beer so far ahead of the season that by the time the season actually comes around, it's all sold out. Oh, yeah, James, we'll do captions. We'll do captions. Hang on. Hang on. All right. Let's get our video underway. I'll turn the captions on. All right, guys, let's get this party started.
So we're going to record this session,
Thank you.
Panel presentation called Talking About Race, Privilege, Gender, and Sexual Orientation in the K-8 Classroom.
We appreciate that.
Aisha, I'm going to invite you just to share a little bit about yourself. We've got some students that have other questions. For those of you students in our classes, know that the link to the agenda, we'll put it in the chat one more time. You can see all the questions that are going to be asked and who's going to be asking
Hey,
those.
Barb.
But Aisha, why don't you start telling us a little bit about yourself?
Bingo cards. I'll get you the bingo cards. Hang on. Bingo card in the chat if you would like to play bingo.
It's always good to see you and my co-panelists, who I feel like I'm becoming fast friends with. Also, Blanca, I think that we went for matching colors today.
Oh,
love it.
Delicious. Cheers, guys.
My name's Aisha. I use she, her, and he, ya, which is Arabic for her pronouns. I'm also comfortable with they, them. Thank you so much again for inviting us here. I do identify, I'm Muslim, did not grow up in a Muslim family. I actually grew up, my parents are Christian. I have two dads. So I grew up in a very LGBTQ plus positive family. And I work in mental health right now, but I've also worked in healthcare and a lot of different aspects of healthcare, including emergency health. I
always love it when these people work in mental health. It works out great.
With the Diversity Center, the local LGBTQ plus center, because I come from a very LGBTQ plus family, and I also identify as queer. I'm gonna pass the mic to Blanca.
Thank you, Aisha. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Blanca Baltasar Sabah. I identify as she, her, ella. And I am
multilingual pronouns today.
College student. I immigrated to this country at the age of 3. My first language is Spanish. Growing up, I learned English in school. One important thing to know about me is that in terms of identity, when I crossed the border, I crossed with someone else's birth certificate. So I actually had a different identity in terms of my name and who I was and who my parents were, as my parents were afraid to register me in school with my real birth name. And so that was a bit confusing once I transitioned to my true name. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. So I was undocumented until I was in high school, and there was the amnesty program, and that is how I became a resident and later a U.S. citizen. And so I am currently the Associate Superintendent of Salinas Union High School District, where I serve over 16,000 families, 83% of them which are it's a high poverty area. You're probably familiar with Salinas. And I think I'd also just like to add that I'm the oldest of 4 children. My dad worked in agriculture till he passed away at the age of 41. My mom became a widow at the age of 40. She worked at the canneries in Watsonville and was part of the Watsonville canning strike in the mid 1980s, which is an important history lesson for our local area. And so I was introduced to social justice issues at a very young age, marching alongside Jesse Jackson and Cesar Chavez when they came to Watsonville as part of the Watsonville cannery strike. And so my passion for ensuring that we provide services to our most marginalized students is something that's very personal to me. And so what I do as a professional in my current job is make sure that I'm always using that lens because I want to make sure that regardless of the zip code that our students live and where they come from, they're afforded the same opportunities and even more so than their peers if they don't come from privileged backgrounds. And so with that, I will pass it on to Glenn.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Glenn Nishibayashi, and wow, Rob, this is a huge group today. I'm a little intimidated by a number of people, but
Yes, and they will all be teaching soon, and people like Blanca will want to hire them all.
Oh,
All
great. Oh, great.
yeah. So I'm a 65-year-old. I identify he, him. I'm learning how to do that. Married to a career educator. She was a teacher for 36 years.
That poor man.
Education.
That poor man.
Kindergarten, second grade, and third grade.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear she taught
2017.
special ed.
I have a
Great.
bachelor's degree in psychology from UC Riverside, which is where Rob and I first met and played on the volleyball team together. I have a master's degree in business from UCLA. I retired in 2016 after a career in finance. 26 years in the corporate world and finishing the final 6 years of my career at UCLA in their budget, finance, and strategic planning office. So that's the quick synopsis of who I am, and we'll get into our stories a little bit later. So I'm going to hand it off to Tyler.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible and follow the lead of my colleagues here. I'm the politician of the group, so I can probably talk too much. So my name is Tyler Williamson. I am a council member in the city of Monterey. I first got elected in 2018, and my term is up this year. So that's going to be an interesting experience. But just to describe a little bit about how I got into this, and again, the shortest version possible for me here is I got involved in the Obama campaign in 2008, and not as much as I wanted to because I was working 2 jobs, going to school full time. And so I knew in 2012 I was going to make myself more committed. So in the spring of 2012, I signed up for a fellowship program with the Obama campaign, and I eventually ended up working on the Obama campaign, and I was responsible for the campaign out of the San Francisco headquarters. And so Obama's one of my life heroes. He's such an inspiration of mine. The basis of his campaign is based on community organizing. And so I took those community organizing skills and brought them back down here to Monterey, where I helped co-found Monterey Peninsula Pride. So
I want to say this, like, for as much as the right shits on Obama, like, Obama knew how to fucking organize and he knew how to get shit done. And if the right was smart, they would have learned lessons from what Obama did. They would have learned lessons. I remember back in the day, Obama got elected when I was working in higher education marketing, and I had whole presentations that I was doing at conferences around the country talking about what Obama did specifically in terms of email marketing, because that was just like that was my area of specialty, like expertise when I was doing marketing, was like email marketing, digital marketing, that sort of stuff. And so I was like going around trying to teach colleges how they could steal Obama's digital marketing techniques in order to get students, stuff like that. If the conservatives were smart, they would spend a lot less time shitting on Obama and a lot more time learning from Obama. Obama started as someone who was a community organizer, gave a great speech at the convention in 2004, got himself elected to a Senate seat out of that speech, and then became president. He knows how to get shit done. You might not like what he did, but you should have paid attention to how he did it, and then you should have copied him. It really wasn't that hard. He gave you a game plan that anyone could implement.
So I'm currently the co-chair of Monterey Peninsula Pride, and yeah, there's a lot there, and all these different little things of my life. The other big thing, because council is on paper a part-time position, my full-time day job is I'm an HR specialist at the Naval Postgraduate School. So that is a little bit about me.
Alrighty, and we can move on to the next question. And so the next question is, can you share a little bit more about your identity and story? What has caused you to be who you are today?
So like normal, one of you is going to start and then you can pass it off, okay?
Okay, my colleagues are being shy today. I'll go first. So the question was a little bit about my identity and what was the last part?
The last question was, what has caused you to be who you are today?
Yeah, so I shared a little bit at the beginning. So I think the fact that I immigrated to this country, and I grew up in poverty, although I'll say that I didn't know that I was growing up in poverty. There's a lot of hardworking people in my family. There was always many people in our home. Never had my own room, never had a quiet space to do my homework, but I always had someone that was home, which was my grandmother, after school, to kind of prepare my after school meal and remind me I needed to do my homework. And so I think the experiences that really shaped the person that I am today is in 4th grade. I had a first-year teacher, Miss Lucy Valdez, who I'll never forget, who was the first teacher who ever cared to ask me about me. Because prior to that, I would typically get in trouble because I would talk a lot in class, and I was the chatterbox in class. And she actually sat down with me and asked, Blanca, why is it that you go and get out of your seat and go talk to, your friends, and, you need to do your work? And so I remember having this conversation with her about, like, this work was really easy for me and I was done and I was bored. And so she immediately made some changes in my schedule. So, like, I would go and read to the kindergartners in the morning once I was done with my work. And then I would
Look at this guy's fucking wife. Look at this.
extensions.
This is the dude who was like I'm 65 and I'm learning how to use pronouns, and I'm married. Like, my wife is queer, a queer former teacher, and now this guy's wife is like hovering over him. I feel so bad for this guy. I've been listening a lot lately to this guy. Does anyone listen to HG Tutor? I just discovered this guy from my friend Andrew Gold, Andrew does like amazing interviews with some of the most interesting people. And so he had HG Tutor on his channel, and so I started listening to him, and this guy is a diagnosed narcissistic psychopath, like legitimate narcissistic personality disorder, like, and he's also a psychopath, so he doesn't experience fear or anything like that. Anyway, I have been binging on this guy's content. I'm working Spirit Matter. I am working very hard to get HG Tutor on my channel. I've been emailing with him. And I really want I want to interview HG Tutor more than I've ever wanted to interview anyone in my life, and I'm not even joking. I will grovel at his fucking feet to interview that guy. I am fascinated. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is like like, why would you come into the room and hover over someone's shoulder if it wasn't a method of control? I am fascinated by power dynamics between people. I just think it's like I just think it's really funny. And so it's like you can already kind of see like a dynamic emerging in their relationship where like you know who's wearing the pants in that family. It is the queer former special ed teacher, not the husband who is learning how to use his pronouns at 65. Man.
in math. And so, because I really enjoyed math and analysis. And so I think
Oh, there she goes.
as a
She's
teacher,
she's deemed it to
we
be
can make
acceptable.
such a huge difference in the lives of students. All it took for her was to have that interest in me as an individual, and really
Yes,
took the
the
time to
husband
get
is
to know me and to get to
absolutely
know
the
my
bottom.
interests.
100% the
And
bottom.
then I would say that later, when I was in high school, well, actually in middle school, I shared my experience with participating in the Watsonville Canning strike. And then times were really difficult. My dad worked an ag picking strawberries, and my mom was on strike. And so there was times where both of them were not working, and so there was not very much money coming in. And I remember being embarrassed as a 6th grader, 7th grader, having to stand in line to get government food. Like we would have powdered box powdered milk and like the big block cheddar cheese and like all this food that I was not used to eating. And it was very difficult, and I didn't understand why I had to go and have a billboard, striking with my mom. I was there, I marched, but I didn't really understand why I was doing it until I was in high school, that I realized, oh, like there's, they were not getting paid fair wages. They didn't have health insurance. They were not given like their
This is
vacation
when
time,
her
like all
mother
this stuff,
made
right?
her a
Just working
communist.
conditions and the role that unions played and why that was important. And so at the same time, I kind of came to the realization about my undocumented status and what that meant, because in 5th grade, I had actually, we had to go to a deportation hearing. Again, I didn't really understand what that meant at that time. My dad was going to be deported and we were all going to be deported. So we were at a hearing, and the judge, they put me in the little box and asked me questions. And the judge was asking me like, where are your friends? Where do you go to school? And so basically the judge, based on my responses, and I was interpreting for my parents. So I was going back and forth. The lawyer didn't speak Spanish. My parents didn't speak English. So I was the interpreter. The court did not have an interpreter for my parents. And because of that, the judge ended up not deporting us. I had a brother at the time who was born here, and asked the lawyer to work with my family to try to get us a residency. And so fast forward, it wasn't until my sophomore year that I gained a legal residence. So I think all those experiences as someone who I saw like being afraid of seeing the green van that had.
What does this have to do with the topic at all?
It wasn't INS, it was something else. And having to run, like if we were going to the store,
Nothing.
we'd have to like run back home and hide, and like
is the answer.
That that fear, but not really understanding because I was so young. All of those experiences, lived experiences, really help shape who I am today and the leader that I am today, because I can empathize with so many of our families. And once I became a professional and I went into teaching, I got to meet students that didn't grow up like me, that actually grew up with wealth and privilege. And I also learned a lot from them, and they got to learn from me. And so I feel like it really put me in a situation where I was also able to be empathetic and not just, to be able to empathize with others who didn't grow up like me, and trying to understand their perspective and their point of view coming from a place of privilege, and why they wouldn't understand why I had
I honestly have no
opinions,
idea
right?
what
And
she's
so
talking about right
I
now,
think it kind of
or why
balanced
this is
out
important, any
my
of this. I have no
perspective to
idea.
being open to different perspectives, and
Yeah, me too,
in
Sarah.
leading, especially in
Hashtag me
tumultuous
too.
times like we have been in the last 2 years, all of that has really helped me be a good listener, and being able to always lead with ensuring that whatever decision we make is based on what's going to be best for our students, and having that kind of guide, that's like my guiding light, right? Like I always, anytime there's a difficult decision, it's always about what is in the best interest of our students. And so I feel that I do that because of my own personal experience leading up. And I'll stop there because there's so much more, but I'm going to pass it on to Glenn.
Thanks, Blanca. I guess a lot of who I am today is thanks to my grandparents and my parents and what they went through. My parents, I'm a third generation Japanese American. My paternal and maternal grandparents emigrated from Japan. They were the Issei. My parents were born in Los Angeles, so they were the Nisei, as we call them. And so I'm third generation Sansei. So a lot of what shaped who I became was based on the perseverance of what my parents and grandparents went through, especially during World War II. Under Presidential Executive Order 9066, my parents and grandparents were forced to leave the Los Angeles area. They were sent to prison camps, which at the time they euphemistically called them internment camps or relocation centers, solely because of their ancestry. My father's family was sent to Jerome, Arkansas, and my mother's family was sent to Heart Mountain, Wyoming. My parents and their siblings were all American citizens by birth. My father was 19 and my mother was 17 at the time they were forced to leave their homes. 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry.
Okay, I want to say, like, the Japanese internment camps are one of the truly dark parts of American history. Slavery is a truly dark part of American history. I don't want to make light of any of this. I think that it was horrific, and there's no way around it. There was absolutely no way around it. However, that is not justification for teaching race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation in K through 8th grade history. People should learn about slavery. People should learn about the civil rights movement. People should learn about the Japanese internment camps. No one is disputing that. Literally, no one is disputing that. These are all subjects that should be taught in schools. These are all subjects that are appropriate for K through 8th grade history. But what these people do is they start with these things that are actually appropriate matters to teach in school. And then they go, we need to teach you about gender and gender ideology and make you question your gender as well before you're even old enough to drive a car in the name of justice. And that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. Just because bad things happened And just because those bad things should be remembered and should be taught does not mean that public schools should be transing the kids in K through 8th grade history. Those are two different things. And if people can't see the difference between those two things, then they absolutely should not be in charge of teaching children.
Ancestry were sent to these internment camps. Over 60% of them were US citizens, but this was part of the World War II Asian fear, fearing that after the Japanese
You're right, Incognito.
attacked Pearl Harbor,
This is the
there's
boring
fear
part. You
that
are
people who
absolutely
looked
right.
like the enemy or were ancestors of the home country of Japan would be threats. So during those times, I think the politicians said, well, we're going to put these people in camps for their own protection. But that's a bunch of, that was a bunch of hooey. So my grandparents were not citizens. They were restricted by law from becoming citizens. There were laws that actually kept them from becoming naturalized citizens. Later in life, laws changed and they were allowed to be naturalized. My mother graduated from high school while at Heart Mountain, and she was the valedictorian of her high school class. I had, my cousin was able to find a copy of her valedictorian speech, and it was amazingly positive about her attitudes of being sent to these camps. I could not believe when I read it that my mom could have that kind of a positive attitude coming out of being sent to these camps, far, far away from their home in environments that they were not used to. So it was just amazing what they endured and what they passed along to me, which really was a life of privilege, never wanting for anything. Well, wanting things, but never needing anything. My dad was very clear on, he used to always say, do you need that or do you want that? Because I'll make sure that whatever you need, you can have. So I used to be honest and say, well, I don't really need it, but I want it. My sister, on the other hand, would say, yeah, I need it. And then she would get it. So that's the benefits of being the baby sister. Anyhow, my father served in the US Army during World War II at the same time that his family was interned in the internment camps. He was an officer in the Military Intelligence Service. And in the post-war era, he actually served as an interpreter in the war crimes trials in Tokyo, Japan, serving under General MacArthur. Once Rob asked me to share an experience that I had while visiting the internment camp recently. A couple of years ago on a trip across the country, my wife and my younger son had the opportunity to visit the site of Heart Mountain, where there's a nice visitor center now. As I entered the visitor center, the docent asked if anyone in my family had actually been at Heart Mountain. And of course, I told her, yes, my mother and her family had all been there. My mother, my uncle, my aunt, my grandparents, they'd all been there. And as I toured the visitor center there was a picture about 3 feet by 5 feet, large picture. And kneeling in the front row was a picture of my grandfather, who was a member of the Heart Mountain Photography Club. He was an avid photographer, has actually had a few shows of his photographs. And it was interesting that a woman who was touring in the museum heard me gasp and saying, oh my God, that's my grandfather. And she was surprised. She actually said, did you actually know your grandfather? I go, oh yeah, he used to come over to my house all the time. So it's amazing to me that when we think about things that have happened in history, that it seems so long ago, but it wasn't really that long ago that these things happened. So anyhow, while I was there,
It's too bad. He seems like a really nice guy.
Aerial map of the location of the area.
He's not a true believer. He's a
just
nice guy.
farmland,
He's a useful innocent.
Overlaid on the current geography of the land is where the different barracks were, and the docent actually circled where my mother's family barrack would have been that they shared with many other families. So I had a very moving experience to actually stand on the site where my mother's family was, where they were housed. And imagine what it would have been like for an 18-year-old to be moved away and sent off to a very desolate, cold place. Going from Los Angeles to Wyoming in middle of winter is not the best thing to do when it's all you can take with you is what you can carry. So that's really an important part of my family history that I've really become more in touch with as an elder adult now. And so but it really is a part of who I am today and how I was raised to always kind of don't make waves, be quiet, study hard, but don't bring attention to yourself. So that's really something.
That's because you're Asian.
Part of me that I didn't really realize until recently. So with that, I will pass it on to Tyler.
I just get so inspired hearing this story, and as has been stated, from
Tyler is a true believer.
We've done this together several times.
Tyler is a
now,
snake,
and the stories never get old. I get emotional every time I hear Glenn's story. I get emotional every time I hear.
I don't believe a word coming out of Tyler's mouth.
Space and,
snake.
And Rob, thanks for continuing to.
That's just intuition. I could be wrong.
So I'll take my history back to my parents, just to give a little bit of perspective. So my father.
Why are they all disappearing? I don't understand.
Was born and raised in a town called Waynesboro, Mississippi. Can't go much deep south. It's kind of southeast Mississippi. And his older brother, there was 12 kids total.
Okay, I'm gonna call it now. True believer. Tyler's a true believer. This woman here who became a Muslim later in life, true believer. Useful innocent, and the guy we just watched, useful innocent. The two on the top are useful innocents. The two on the bottom, watch out for those two.
And his oldest brother would talk back to white people in their town. And my dad was born in 47. So a little bit of perspective, pre-civil rights. And so his parents thought that he was going to get himself killed. And so they had a family friend that lived close by, and they asked if they had relatives that lived up in Albany, New York. So they asked if they could get him to move to Albany. He did. And then he saved up enough money. He bought a car. He drove down to Mississippi and drove everybody back up, the entire family back up to Albany. And so my dad was 12 years old when he migrated up to Albany. My mom is from upstate New York, in a town called Glens Falls. If you're familiar with Saratoga Springs, and it's about 45 minutes north of Albany. So my parents met. My mom is white looking, even though she is mixed. She has some black in her. But when my mom's parents met my father, they obviously were not okay with that. They're from a very conservative backcountry town, and it was tense at first. And it took actually my parents having us as kids to allow some of those barriers to be broken. So from a very young age, I think the race thing has always been an issue. There's always been tension there. And then just kind of making that intersection, right? We have something in the queer community that we often talk about, intersectionality.
Oh, he's queer.
Which is coming
of course
from
he's
two
queer.
or more disadvantaged communities,
Intersectionality.
discriminated communities. And
Told
so,
you, true believer.
Growing up, not really thinking much of it until I got.
Does anyone else find that true believers just have a different vibe than useful innocents? Like, you can almost identify them on sight. Like, I never thought that older guy was a true believer. And then he opened his mouth. He's like, I'm learning how to use pronouns at age 65 because my queer teacher wife told me to. No, he is nothing wrong with that guy. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to quantify it, except that like when you watch this content for a while, there is a different energy, a different feeling between true believers and useful innocents. There's an inauthenticity to the true believers. Like I completely believe both the stories that the people on top told. I think that they're doing things because they care. I think they are genuinely empathetic individuals. I think that they actually do believe in fairness and justice. But like the true believers don't. They don't actually care about anyone except for themselves. Yeah, exactly. He probably thought this was just a legitimate conversation. He was invited to be a part of it, was probably honored to be invited to speak at a college class. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, I agree with this. The true believers have a significant it's like the difference between a narcissist and an empath. God, I'm picking up too much HG Tutor in my head. This is what he talks about. Like narcissists have like it's a low, thick, like low, dense. That's the word I'm looking for. Dense energy. Whereas true believers are like lighter. Or excuse me, not true believers. Useful innocents are lighter. True believers are very tribalist. Yes. Yeah, a stalwarty, a damning vibe. That's a great word for it, Brooklyn Way. Damning. It's heavy. It's dense. It's like walking through mud. That's what it is.
Maybe into like middle school, high school time frame where, you know, I started noticing maybe an attraction towards people of the same sex more so than the opposite sex. And so I would, again, not fully understanding that and realizing it, I got bullied by classmates, by my own siblings, particularly my older brother. I'm one of 4 boys, and I'm the second oldest. So a lot of
Everyone gets
bullying
bullied.
experiences growing up, and it was particularly challenging
Everyone gets
because
bullied.
you know, it's, I think, something that is probably not tolerated in a lot of families, but I think particularly the Black community, it's something that's very much frowned upon. And my dad identifies himself as a preacher man, so he thinks he's somebody. and so there was a lot of challenges associated with that. And I would even carry it into when I got into college. The first college that I went to after I graduated high school was the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And I only finished my plebe year there, which is your freshman year. I got bullied while I was there. And for a long time, I thought it had to do more with my race than my sexual orientation. But I didn't come out until maybe several years after that. And the interesting thing about that experience is that it was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So they probably saw mannerisms, but they couldn't say anything. And they're probably thinking that maybe I am who I am, and I maybe recognize that, but they can't ask, and I can't say. But when I look back on it, I mean, I remember very specific moments where they treated me different in when it came to gender identity, I guess, if you will, right? So I remember one specific example where one of the upperclassmen said, at the end of they call it plebe summer, they have this thing where they get us together, we stand on the bulkhead, we're standing against the wall at attention, and the upperclassmen are kind of walking down the center of the P-way, is what we call it, the hallway. And then they were doing like skits, kind of making fun of us as freshmen.
So everyone got made
which
fun
is a
of?
lot of things
Is
wrong
what
with
you're
this in the
saying?
first place, but it was supposed to be kind of light and humorous.
Everyone got made fun of?
And then one of the
'Cause that's
upper
what it
class
is?
said,
At a
like,
military
in
academy?
like a high-pitched voice, like, I'm Midshipman Williamson, right? And like speaking as if I had a feminine voice. And like everybody was laughing, like everybody. And
Everyone got
it
bullied.
hurt. I mean, it hurt. Like, there's no way around that. So when I think about a little bit about how that's kind of made me the person that I am today, I'm super empathetic.
Okay, I'm gonna say this. I worked at a military school. This was my first job out of college. It wasn't an academy, but I worked at Norwich University for like 5 years right out of school. Norwich University is a military school. And well, there are civilians there too, but like it is very very similar to the military academies. And the reason I'm saying this is because what he just described happens to everyone. It happens to everyone. It had nothing to do with the fact that he's gay. It happens to everyone. I bet what they did to him, they did to like every other freshman there. I bet everyone who is in the military right now in my chat has experienced something similar, because that is what happens in the military and at military schools. I mean, incognito, am I making this up? I don't think I am. So, I'm sorry, like, this guy needs to toughen up. He needs to build some resiliency. Like, you had someone make fun of your voice? Congratulations, welcome to my daily life on the fucking internet. It happens all the time. Why do you need other people to validate you? Why on earth did you go to the Naval Academy? My God, you can't take a bit of hazing? Did you think hazing didn't happen at the Naval Academy? Did you not witness all of your other classmates being hazed in exactly the same way? How on earth did you think you were going to survive in the military if you couldn't handle that? My God. Yeah, so Incognito says, it happens to everyone. It's done on purpose to break you. Jan says, my husband is in the military. It happens. The whole purpose is to tear you down to build you back up.
I really, really feel when people describe their feelings. And I think it's an important thing that's often overlooked. Like, I think we spend so much time kind of, you know, even in the education world, thinking about STEM, right? Science, technology, the math, right? The very hard stuff, which is important. It's 100% important, but so is empathy and kindness and reading. And, you know, there's
Another fun fact, while I worked at the military school, I actually had a rank in the Vermont State Militia when I worked at the military school. I had like I was a, what the fuck was my rank? I was a lieutenant colonel in the Vermont State Militia when I worked at the military school. That's true. I could have worn a uniform and everything.
this side
I
that
did not wear a uniform, but I could have.
feel doesn't get as much attention, and I feel like I provide that space a lot in the spaces that I enter. So I think about my experience on the council. You know, I was the first African American to be elected to the Monterey City Council. I was the first openly queer person to be elected to the Monterey City Council. I was the youngest person to be elected to the council. So lots of firsts there, and that burden is heavy. But I bring such a different voice to the council. I am on a council with all straight old white men, and nothing against straight old white men, right? Like, nothing against them. But if you were to sit and listen to the council meetings, you could see where, like, I'm like over here, kind of this voice, and then the rest of them are kind of more over here. And it's, I
You
definitely
mean you live
bring
in a
different
rich
voice
area
to
in
the
California and
council,
you think
and
differently
your
than the rich
experiences
people
and
that
who
are on the
you are,
council?
right? No matter
Got
how
it.
much you want to think otherwise, it really makes a difference in how you see and approach the world and what you can bring to the table. So I try to bring that authentic self. I think another big thing that I've learned through my life experiences is integrity, and just trying to stay true to
Yes,
who I
you
am,
are
and
the
just kind
only
of
one
being
with
my authentic
integrity in the
self.
world.
And it's something that I struggle with because,
These people
you
are
know,
so
in a lot of
awful.
ways, the world has told me that it's not okay to be like this. But I've had like so many wonderful, lovely.
Bro, you are not the only person with integrity in the world just because you care about social justice. These people are just so infuriating. You know, I was thinking about this. If you watched the stream yesterday on my main channel where we were talking about what happened at New Hampshire Public Radio yesterday and the protest, like you saw a part of the video where 3 employees of New Hampshire Public Radio were looking into the camera that my friend Joel was holding with just like absolute disdain in their eyes. And I knew one of those people, and she's like actually a really nice person. She was always really nice to me, but they were looking at him with just absolute disdain. Like they were looking at him like he was a lower life form because he didn't comply with how they saw the world. And I feel like this guy is doing the same thing. He's like, these old white men. Like it's absolute disdain and it's arrogance. And it's just there is no acknowledgement at all that there are other ways to view the world that is not their way, and that you are not the only one with integrity. You are not the only one with authenticity. You are not the only one with righteous indignation. There are other people who have integrity and authenticity and righteous indignation that completely disagree with every single thing you believe. Brooklyn Way says, noticed he mentioned STEM. There is a hard push to merge STEM and SEL. Been digging in on that this week. Keep your eyes and ears out for more on this moving forward. Really good note, Brooklyn Way, because I hadn't noticed that. So definitely thank you for bringing that up. I really do appreciate it. Incognito says, follow up during boot camp the first day with drill sergeants. They did a shark attack. Dude passed out and was processed out of the army within days. Yeah, there's a purpose to all of that.
Lovely people. I think of you, Aisha, like this, your kindness and care.
These
right?
people
like,
would never survive a war.
It makes me feel comfortable
would
in
never
entering this
happen.
space and being who I am, which is important, right? When we're talking about youth coming into a classroom and
I'm already
having the
done this first
capacity and
beer.
the ability to be able to learn,
So this bodes
and
well.
to hear what you're saying or hear what the other students are saying.
This guy is driving me
so
to drink.
critically important. Like it's like if they're not listening, then everything else is for naught. And so yeah, just acceptance is a big piece of that. There's so much more to the story, but I'll stop there for now and pass it to Aisha.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I don't know how, after we've been on this panel so many times, I feel like I still learned something new about you all, and I just adore you all even more for that. And I'm really grateful for your candor and your sharing.
I'm wondering that as well, Bot.
Super underqualified.
Is this like a group therapy session? This is a college class. Why are you using this as group
sort
therapy?
of in between two worlds because my dad came out when I was pretty young, and my mother lives in Idaho and is sort of a
half an hour into this, and they've said nothing of value. This is a waste of time. We're gonna keep watching, but this is like a waste of time. They're half an hour into this, and they've said nothing.
My kitchen Alexa, everything's fine.
God.
And I grew up, in these two worlds. It was very interesting because my dad,
angry,
after he came out,
this
he
is
moved
annoying.
to California, and he met my other dad. They've been together for quite a while. I won't say how long because it'll almost age me, and I'm very age non-specific. But they've been together for a really long time, more than 2 decades. And when I was young, I sort of used to feel like I led two simultaneously very interestingly different lives. I would go to school and I went to, I lived in a sort of conservative town. I was definitely a little bit of a pariah after everybody knew that my dad was gay. I lost a lot of friends in that time and found out a lot of what people were saying behind my back. It was interesting. I became best friends with my best friend at the time because I watched her stand up for someone else in the bus when jocks were bullying somebody for being gay. And she was just so proud, and she was just so stand-up-ish, and she challenged them to say those kinds of things to her face, and everyone was scared of Brenda. So I was like, oh, she has to be my friend. And I really learned at the time that I was probably a pretty angry teenager, but I think it was because there was just so much around me that I didn't agree with. And thankfully, my other sort of upbringing was in the LGBTQ plus community. My dad's for a while lived above a gay bar, and I would go on my breaks in winter
good.
and summer and hang out with drag queens as they got dressed to
Good.
perform. And they taught me so much about loving yourself, about being your authentic self, about not listening to people who hate on you for who you are. And it really just meant so much to me. I think later, when I converted to Islam, I've been Muslim for about 20 years. Actually, I think this is gonna be my 22nd Ramadan, starting in April. The reason I think that I was able to wear a scarf in so many different situations was just because I had grown up in this community that said, like, you're great and wonderful for who you are. And if other people don't know that, then that's their loss. And I've just hopefully sort of carried that with me, and hopefully always carried with me the idea that you have to stand up for other people and really listen to them when they tell you
Is she in
their
her 40s?
experience, and do your
When
best
did she become a
to
Muslim?
advocate for people in a way that really leverages
She
the
doesn't look
privilege
like
that
she's
you
in her
have in life.
40s.
I was really lucky that I had friends who
If she's in her
educated
40s,
me
good
on
for her,
real
man.
history, as I call it,
Real
because
history.
I was just taught
Okay.
such whitewashed history.
See,
and
true
to be
believer, I
honest,
told
many
you.
years later, I'm still very salty about it. But
True
thankfully,
believer.
people gave me the people's history of the United States, and that changed my life. And people gave me
Fucking
so many
people's
different
history of the United
historical
States.
backgrounds
God
and
damn it.
experiences that they had, and I was willing to listen. And I just hope that as we move forward, you all are teaching a really well-rounded version of history and not just this glossed over version of it. I'm really grateful to the people who took time out to explain to me my own ignorance at one point, probably in a much nicer way. And that's really something that I try to carry with me every day. When
I have a copy of that book in my basement.
Like now in my life, I really try very hard to be an LGBTQ
I should read it again.
activist, and I do interfaith work in the Muslim community. And I was really nervous about that for a while when I had just become a leader in the Muslim community in college. But, everywhere that I go, so far I get a pretty decent reaction, and I do still always believe that if people don't like it, too bad. So I try to live that every day and really stand up for folks and help people. I think the hardest thing for me growing up was not seeing myself and like everyone would always say, like, your parents, your mom and dad, or they really have a very binary heteronormative idea of what kids are going through at home. And nowadays I hear a lot of my friends who are parents in California, their kids get to hear your parents, your guardians. And I think all of those things make a huge difference in making kids feel valid and accepted, and also just not putting up with that bullying that kids can tend towards, that humans can tend towards in class. It would have made a lot of a difference to me if anyone, I think, had stood up for me when I was young, until I met Brenda, who's the mouthiest person in the world and my best friend to this day. It makes a huge difference when someone stands up for you, particularly if it's somebody you don't know or someone in a place of authority. I think I would have had a lot less trouble and been maybe a little bit less angry as a teenager if someone had done that. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you so much for sharing. As we move on to the next question,
finally,
how did you see yourself or not in the curriculum, particularly in your history classes in elementary, middle, or high school? Do you remember your teachers talking about your culture or history in the classroom at any time?
Why
We're going to
is
start
it?
with Glenn because
God damn it! Why is it necessary to teach about their specific identity?
And so I wanted to show you the
That makes
photo.
no sense.
Oh, you're not. Are you seeing the photo?
Yeah,
Yes, I can see it.
on Flickr.
Great. Yeah. So Glenn, I thought you'd go first on this question, and if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, so my grandfather is the one in the middle kneeling behind the little boy that someone is nice enough to put the cursor on. I remember going there with my younger son and pointing out that picture and saying, "Son, this is why you have big ears." But in terms of the question, I would say that the World War II internment experience was never in any curriculum when I was in high school.
Bullshit.
I understand that it might be now.
I absolutely
but
learned
when
about
I
it.
was there in high school, which was
Show of hands in the chat or whatever emoji you want. How many of you learned about the Japanese internment camps in school? I did. I 100% did. It wasn't like a week long of the curriculum or anything, but I absolutely learned about the Japanese internment camps in school. I also learned about slavery in school. I learned about the civil rights movement in school. I learned about the Civil War in school. I learned about how when they bought New York from the Indians, they gave them like smallpox infested blankets in school. Yes, everyone learned all this in school. Everyone in the chat says they learned this in school. Everyone in chat learned it in school. This is not a new thing. Everyone learned it in school.
a million years ago. It was never a part of the discussion of World War II.
I was in school in the 90s.
So my family history was not in the books.
Bullshit.
And I think that's an important thing to note, is that if
Yo,
I
hang
know
on.
that classroom.
I learned less about my family history than I learned about this guy's family history in school. I didn't learn about France in school. My family comes from France. Most of them. France and Ireland. I didn't learn about France in school. I didn't learn about Ireland in school. I learned about the Japanese internment camps in school. My family I'm descended from the people who founded Quebec. I didn't learn about that in school. So what? Too bad, so sad, life goes on. If you want to learn about your family, then ask your family. My family is a whole family fucking tree. I learned my whole family history from my family. Why didn't your family teach you your family history? I never had the expectation that I would learn about France or Ireland in school. Makes no sense.
Time is very, very, very tight. Having had a wife who was a teacher, I know that there's all these things you have to get through. So there's a limited amount of time. So you have to be very careful about how you use your time. But when your personal history is not included, then to me that shows that it's not important. And if your history isn't important, then it discounts your personal value. So my family's experience in the internment camps was
Why
never
can't your
represented in the
family
classroom.
teach you?
And so that was just the only way I learned that in history. It was just through family stories. So I think it's important as you launch your careers into teaching history, I think it would be great for your students to actually share their family history, so that your students in your classroom can get a different perspective on history, because each of us comes from a different place. And I think that would be a great way to broaden the experience of history, as well as gives your students a chance to do public speaking, which I think is, I've known that public speaking is a
That's
difficult
actually a
thing
legit
for most
point.
adults. It's one of the things that people fear most is
I don't mind this idea. I don't mind this idea of students talking about their family history in class to teach them not only about their family history, which they're going to have to ask their parents about, but also to teach them to do public speaking. I don't think that that's a bad idea. See, the useful innocence oftentimes will actually give good ideas. Because they're not bought into this bullshit. They think they're just trying to do the right thing. So I don't mind that idea. I think it's good.
public speaking. And so getting your students to talk about their family history would be a great way to kill two birds with one stone there. So I'll pass it on to who wants to go next? Okay, I'll pass it off to Blanca.
Thank you, Glenn. And I think I had a similar experience. I do not remember my history being shared. And growing up in elementary, middle school, or high school, I didn't really learn much about my history until I was in college. And so Glenn, I'll let you know, I don't think I've shared this before, but at Watsonville High School, where I graduated from, we had a teacher, Mas Hashimoto, who taught US history, and he lived in internment camps. So the students in Watsonville definitely got to hear about that.
Barb is asking a great question in the chat. What's the topic again? Excellent question, Barb, because they haven't touched on the topic at all. As you can see from the title at the bottom of the screen, the topic is supposed to be talking about race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation in the K-8 history classroom. Not talking about the lived experiences of the people on the panel. But maybe we'll get to that. We still do have about about 50 minutes of the presentation left, almost an hour. So we might get there yet. But guys, grab a drink, mount that like button. I'm about to finish my first beer, 40 minutes into it, and that's an 8.3% beer. So this doesn't actually bode well for us as this presentation goes on. I'm just going to warn everyone, I might get a little silly. It's your fault for voting for the Imperial Raspberry Sour at the beginning. If you don't want me to get silly, don't vote for the Imperial Beer at the beginning. It's all your fault, really. I'm just kidding about that. Anyway, let's keep going.
The Japanese experience from him. He's like a living legend here in this community. And I also agree with Glenn that having students share their own stories and interviewing their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their parents, to learn more about their history is so important. I was able to do that when I was in college, and I learned so much.
Yo, ain't it the truth?
The Bracero program
Ain't it
that my
the
grandfather
truth,
was
man?
part of, and
Ain't it the
all the
truth?
different states he worked in, and how life was like for him. And you know, he actually got residency through his employer here in Watsonville, where he ended up settling because the community and the climate was very similar to where we're from in Mexico, which is the state of Michoacan, in a small town called Quiroga. And so I think had I had that opportunity in elementary school, I would have been more curious and asked more questions, or about my grandmother's side of the family on my mom's side, and kind of the Spanish bloodline there. And she remembered, she was born in 1918, and just about the Mexican Revolution, and just so much rich history that that I learned, but it was late. And so when we're learning history, we feel so disconnected from it. And then sometimes the history always makes anybody who's not European look bad. And so it's so important. So I would echo Glenn's sentiment of, as you enter your teaching career, to remember that and give students that voice. And I'll pass it on to Aisha.
Thank you. I think that when I look at, I love the idea that you all talk about interviewing your family members. I actually didn't even realize that one of my grandfathers had moved to America, because my Latinx family are very sort of, they're very whitewashed. They really didn't raise us at all with language, with too much culture that was related to them. And it wasn't until my grandfather died that I found out so much about him. It's really a blessing to be able to interview our family members and learn about them and their history while they're alive. That's why I love a lot of those historical projects that just go out and interview people from different cultures and get more information about them, because it's so important. And if we don't do that, we lose that. And it's important when I look at the world today, and everyone who's sort of scared of telling history in a way that makes people feel bad. I just want to say that the
Barb.
first reaction, I think, of
Barb, I'm so glad you've joined my community. We are of like mind.
The first reaction that people often have
Welcome.
is sort of feeling bad or being angry. But after that, people move on to being a lot more empathetic, and they move on to wanting to know more, and they move on to wanting to be informed about history. And if we don't learn our history, then we will lose it, and we'll lose that really important context. I think when it came to I didn't realize there were so many heroes in LGBTQ plus history until I was much older and in college. Later, as a Muslim,
Oh,
when I
you
went
learned
to
it in
I
college.
found out all sorts of great
Did you
Muslim
also
heroes
convert to
as
becoming a
well.
Muslim in college?
And
No shade
that
to
was
Muslims.
really sort of shocking because I hadn't been introduced to a lot of characters from around the world. In fact, US history is so insular that we learn one version of like just American history when the world is a big, huge place. And if you live around the world, that's probably one of the biggest things that people say about American education, that we don't get enough of this well-rounded sort of world perspective. And it, I think, has a real impact on how we view the world. I hear a lot of my peers right now talking about how sometimes we see refugees from one place and it gets a ton of sympathy. Like Ukraine has been on my mind all the time. I wake up in the morning and I check my favorite cat lady's Twitter. Why? Because I want to make sure she's okay, because I'm like invested in Senta and I hope to God that she and her family are still okay out there in the world. And people point out that that's not the reaction we have when war happens, maybe in other places in the global South. And you know, how many newscasters recently have said like, oh, this is different because it's from a civilized country. Like Baghdad and Syria, those places were civilized. They were like the heart of civilization. Where did the first written laws come out of? Baghdad. So there's so much more than just American history, and I think it affects everybody. And we're doing a disservice to ourselves by not teaching that. And I think that's the thing that still keeps me, hopefully, like with this righteous indignation at history and the world, like seeing, I do not want to see my fictional future children learn about the missions and make a tiny little mission. I don't want to see that anymore. Like, we know what missions are about. We need to tell that history. We need to tell like the stories of the indigenous people who lived here, who almost lost their language, you know, who were almost absolutely annihilated by people who like took the land. But it's
By
so
the white
important
man.
not to just tell that one viewpoint of history, because the world is so much bigger. And I'm grateful every time to sit here with you all that tell me more about that. And hopefully,
okay, I need
learned
another
enough to be
show of hands in the chat. How many of you took a world history class in high school? Show of hands, how many people took a world history class in high school and learned about more than just US history in high school? Because according to these people, you never learn more than US history in high school. So I'm just wondering if anyone else learned about more than just US history in high school. Yes, I took a world history class in high school. It was, I believe it was either freshman or sophomore year. I don't really remember which one. I'm pretty sure it was in the 10th grade. I'm pretty sure it was sophomore year. Yep. Yep. Everyone took a world history class in high school. Steven even took one in middle school. Steven's high school was probably, or middle school was probably progressive. Yep. Everyone took a world history class. Everyone took a world history class. That's not an earth-shattering revelation. They've had world history in school for a while.
To be humble and listen to that when people tell me that they have a different experience as a person of color or as a trans person or any of those things. Like, I want to listen and understand. And if we get that experience in our history classes, that really helps us as we move forward to see that the world isn't just this one tiny viewpoint. And I will pass it to Tyler.
Oh, good. We have to listen to Tyler again for half an hour.
I think you all said it all already in regards to like the
expressly
lack
what I was
of
hoping
representation in learning history in grade school, and I would say that's definitely the case from my experience as a.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. We're
as a
talking about
Black
grade
person,
school. We're talking
as a
about
queer
K through 8th
person,
grade. I apologize.
and in particular, when
high
we talk
school
about that
doesn't count.
intersectionality, right? So I think about writers like James Baldwin. I think about local.
You want to teach James Baldwin to kindergarteners? The topic of this is K through 8th grade history. You want to teach James Baldwin to elementary and middle schoolers? Do you understand that many people in college don't understand fucking James Baldwin? Why on earth do you think it would be productive to teach James Baldwin to 13 years old and younger? They're not going to be able to understand James Baldwin. They're not equipped. It makes no sense.
Local activists doing the real work in the community that could be leveraged. Like I call him Quasar, but he works at CSUMB. Stephen Goings, some of you may have heard, just doing great work in the community as a queer person. I think of Mel Mason, who's well known for doing work in the African American community locally. Right, there's a lot of resources that can be tapped into.
Barb, you're cool.
It was just I think
you can have moments. I understand. You're cool.
I mean, I remember. I don't know. I can't remember what grade it was, but I remember going into a history book.
I appreciate your comment, Barb. I won't show it on the screen, but I appreciate it.
It talked about the Stonewall riots. I mean, it must have been like civil rights movement or something, right? And it was just like a little paragraph, Stonewall riots, a picture, and then it kind of moved on to the next thing. And it's like, that doesn't do it justice. And I just kind of want to make that connection to what all of you said in regards to the power of a story. It's so important for folks to be able to share stories. And I would say not even just from one's family, which I think that it tends to connect there in regards to perhaps one's race or ethnicity or country of origin. But when you're queer, it may be a little bit harder to get that from your family, unless there's a queer person in your family that you've been able to connect with, or you just have super supportive parents, which exist and they're out there. And so it makes me reflect on too my experience with the Obama campaign, right? When I was telling you about the community organizing, the fundamental piece of the community organizing, and there was like the snowflake effect, if anybody understands what I'm saying there. It's like one person kind of finds three people and it kind of spreads type of thing. But the whole basis of that, and like you going out there and saying something, it's your story. And it's like taking an issue like healthcare and talking about how you had this experience. And because nobody can argue with your story, it's your story. And it's very powerful. And so I think for little ones to be able to share their story and learn from one another, as opposed to something that's done through a lecture, which is kind of like a one-way conversation usually. It can go a long way towards the learning experience and the learning process. I'm just going to throw one last piece in here and say that I imagine that some of you may become administrators at some point. And so it's important through all levels of the educational experience. And so as an administrator, right, it's important to recruit folks that look different than what is typically seen, right? So it's important to have queer people in positions of leadership.
Why?
Because you might be able to pull them into a classroom and help speak to students when the subject comes up, or just them seeing them around campus and being open about that experience. It can save somebody's life. So representation matters, and it could be in the smallest of ways.
Rob, if I may just add, I in the chat, I'm going to share a link to a slide deck.
They're still not talking about K through 8th grade history.
Poem that my son wrote in 4th grade instead of building a mission.
I just want to point that out.
Immersion school, and his teacher gave them choices, and so it is in Spanish, but it's a 2-voice poem. So it's the perspective of the conquistadores and the perspectives of the indígenas. I want to share it with you as as a model of showing, giving students choice can just bring up so much. And I remember he was so passionate about it and so angry at learning the other side of the history. And so to this date, his teacher uses it as a model. He is now a sophomore in high school, but this is in fourth grade. So I'll just put the link there. You can take a look at it later.
If I could just throw one last thing out that I forgot to bring up is, I think, like setting some ground rules, right? So that way when a conversation starts, you kind of set the expectation of what is not appropriate and what is. And I think that's really important, especially when you're getting into a very touchy subject, because if somebody says something that is inappropriate and it's not addressed from the get-go, their response, even though it was wrong, their response might be valid because they were going into a conversation where they didn't fully understand that. So I think having those foundational rules when you're beginning a conversation are essential to make people feel more open and talking and sharing their own experiences.
So going to that question, what you were just talking about, Tyler. So some families may feel uncomfortable discussing these topics. What is the best way to educate parents about teaching topics of race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation?
Here we go. We made
And
it,
also how
guys.
to,
We made it to the good
teachers
part.
handle personal conflicts that they may come in contact
Good.
with while teaching these in the classroom, especially around social justice.
Yes. Why might parents object to
Callie,
this?
you want to jump on that?
Call all parents racist, please. Please do it. Please, just for me.
Did you say Tyler?
No, he didn't,
Yes.
Tyler. No!
Could you say the question one more time?
God.
Yeah,
Tyler's
so
a
it's a
narcissist.
two-part question.
I'm going to start
So,
diagnosing
we were
everyone
talking
as a
about, like, the
narcissist now.
conflicts, pertaining
It's gonna
to
happen.
certain topics. So I guess the question.
I'm going to
my
turn
question
into
is,
Carrie Smith. I'm
so
like,
some
he's a
families may
narcissist,
be
and he's a
uncomfortable
narcissist,
discussing
and
these
he's
or
a
having, like,
narcissist. By the way,
kids be taught about race.
can I just tell you guys, can I change the topic for a second and drop some gossip? Would anyone be mad if I drop some gossip right now that has nothing to do with this? This is what happens when you guys vote for an 8.3% beer at the beginning of happy hour. I get gossipy. Okay. So, you guys know I've been playing this Twitter game with Carrie Smith, who is Carrie Smith is the good Christian. Mike Harlow is the fame whore, and Deb Philman is stepmom, right? And I've been playing this Twitter game where every single day that these three people go without talking about me, they get a point for not talking about me. So it's like the whole point of the game is to incentivize them to not talk about me. So in the course of this Twitter game, I have to actually look at their fucking Twitter, which I don't really like to do because it's annoying and they don't say anything interesting anyway, except when they're talking about me. That's the only thing interesting that they say. I'm being facetious there. They're going to clip that out of context and make it seem like I'm serious. I was being facetious just then. But I really actually don't like to look at their Twitter because I find it to be toxic and annoying. Anyway, so Carrie and Mike Harlow are at this Chrissy Mayer content house thing in Florida. Is anyone watching this? So I think Chrissy Mayer is possibly one of the stupidest people that has ever lived on the planet ever. I think she is only outdone in her stupidity by the simp of a man that she married. These two people are ridiculous. They're ridiculous. But apparently, Chrissy Mayer has gathered a whole bunch of wannabe influencers in the same house in Florida where they are making content. And they did a promo where they're like, content house. And they did like this, it was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't understand the point of any of this. But I looked into it just because I saw Carrie talking about it on Twitter. So I watched a few minutes of the Content House 48-hour live stream today. Can I just tell you guys, it was the saddest, most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life. It was like all of these people who were like nerds and picked on in high school. And I was a nerd and picked on in high school. So I'm not no shade to the nerds. But some nerds are picked on in high school and they graduate from high school and they move on and they have a productive and fulfilling life, right? Some nerds are picked on in high school and they hang on to that for the rest of their lives. And they try to compensate by later in life forming a cool kid high school clique. And that is exactly what this content house thing is. It's all like 30 somethings, or in Carrie's case, a 40 something. It's all of these like older people who are at least in their 30s pretending that they're in high school or in a sorority in college and like reliving that experience. And it was just like the part of the stream I watched today was just so awful. It was like Carrie was sitting in the middle of the couch and she was flanked by like these two like I don't even know what they were. I have no idea. Like these two people who are like want to be famous on the internet. And Carrie was like trying to have an intellectual conversation about the woke ideology with these people. And these people were like, yeah, and I was expelled from high school and I had to go on the short bus and I like to smoke weed and all this stuff. And like Carrie's in the middle of these two people and they're like just behaving like I don't even know what. Like children. I'm like, yo, like I could not. I like if that is Carrie Smith and Mike Harlow's definition of success. I am so happy I'm unsuccessful if that is what the definition of success is. Because I could never in a million years would I lower myself to even remotely spend time with these people, let alone travel to go be a content house with these people for a whole fucking weekend. I would sooner shoot myself in the foot every day of the week. These people are so far beneath me and so far beneath like many of you in the chat. Probably all of you in the chat, except for the people who are hate watching me now, because of course there are people who are hate watching me right now. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is what success looks like? Pretending you're in a sorority? When you're in your 30s? I cannot imagine anything more miserable. Anyway, that's my gossip. That's all. I just had to complain because it's so sad and pathetic. I just don't even know. All right, let's keep going.
Gender, sexuality, and privilege. How can we educate parents on these? And also, how can we educate our instructors to be able to properly teach these topics in the classroom, especially topics surrounding social justice?
Oh, I'm sure they have a kid.
Yeah, so I think it does. You're right.
I'm sure
it does
they
get
do.
into what I was just saying.
Probably
in
a
regards to,
Miller
setting
Lite
those
or some other horrible
foundational
beer.
rules. My partner is a history teacher in Alisol. He's actually.
I just want to say
classes.
though. Sorry, I have one more thing to say about this. This is the beer talking. We've gotten into beer talk already. I have to say though, like seeing the sad state of affairs on this live stream and like the caliber of people that Carrie Smith and Mike Harlow are hanging out with, it totally justified. Like I feel totally validated. I have nothing to prove to these people. I feel completely and 100% validated. If success in life means acting like I am still in high school when I am 41 fucking years old, you can take success and shove it, man. I will be a failure and I don't really care. I would sooner be considered to be a failure in life by people who think it's acceptable to act like you're in a fucking sorority when you're in your 40s than I would want to be considered successful by those people. So it was I don't know how many people care about my mental health, probably no one, and that's totally fine, but it was a deeply validating experience for me. I feel really good about myself and what I've accomplished in life. Exactly. Who the fuck wants to be back in high school? I didn't even like high school when I was in high school. Why do I want to be in high school now? It makes no sense.
right now for his education
What
administration degree.
losers?
So sometimes it's nice because I get to listen in to like what he's learning. It's fascinating. And so they were talking about this very subject, like how do you deal with the conflict of parents that might, you know, try to use religious their religion as an excuse for their children not to have to learn some of these things. And what you are allowed to teach in the classroom is history, right? And you cannot take and I apologize if I'm not fully framing this in the right way because I'm not a teacher, but just from what I'm hearing, right, it's like the parent can feel uncomfortable about that, but the content is the content, and that's a requirement. That's part of the curriculum, and so they're allowed to teach those, and they have to teach those in a public school. So you know, I think, how do you address that appropriately with parents? You know, it's a tough thing because the focus needs to be on the children, right, on the youth. And I think if the parents,
the youth are the future,
really care about that, they're going to make sure that their children have the best education possible.
You don't care about your children
sure
if you don't teach them critical race theory.
How to address
okay, this is definitely the beer talking.
Specifically, because I don't know how that.
I shouldn't have given you guys this beer as an option. It was a bad idea.
With the education system. But parents are such an essential part of that conversation, right? Because the children are going home every day. They're spending most of their time with those parents. And so as much as possible, if we can find ways of getting parents on board and getting them actively engaged.
Exactly. The youth are the children of the future.
With the curriculum, keeping them posted and aware, like that communication, I think is just really important. So I'm interested in hearing particularly what Blanca has to say in regards to this question. So I'm going to pass it to Blanca.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler. So a couple things in terms of, especially I think it's a little bit, in elementary school, might be a little bit easier to do it through books when you're touching on these subjects, and having parent nights where you're going to have these conversations and there's an outline, and you may get those parents who and actually staff, so that may not feel comfortable teaching the content. And so I go back to what Tyler said, which is we're teaching history. These are facts. So we're not trying to
lived experiences are not facts.
Belief system of what their identity is.
No, there has not been. It's been very disappointing.
You know, they're changing their gender or any of that. This is the history. This is factual.
No.
And just like we teach about slavery, right? That's a fact in history. We teach it from a certain perspective. Then we need to also teach it from this other point of view. And I will say that, I don't know, Rob, maybe 4 years ago when we started incorporating LGBTQ history into our curriculum in the high school district, so middle school and high school.
Oh, there it is.
I'll say that I think there was a much more fear from the staff than actually what ended up happening once we integrated it and once we shared. We had very few parents, but I think a lot of it had to do with the professional development that we prepared teachers with, and Rob was led that professional development for us, and also having the teachers understand that this is history and how to introduce the history so that it didn't feel overwhelming, right, for the students, and also to be prepared for students' emotions, right? Because for the first time ever in a student's experience, you know, if they're gay or lesbian or queer, for the first time ever, they're going to be listening to part of their story. And so we also had to acknowledge that this might bring up some emotions and, you know, things that students are going to have to deal with. So we also were prepared with ensuring that we had the counseling available for students and sharing with students.
I'm going to go with
that,
ice cream sour.
Class,
banana split ice cream sour.
And they needed to talk to someone. These are the resources that are available. Or they could just check in with the teacher, touch base with the teacher. So I think anytime we are going to touch a delicate subject as educators, we just need to be prepared for that and have kind of that backup plan to support the student and the family. And the best way, I think, to to build that rapport with families and that trust prior to you getting into those topics is through those communications with the family and trying to contact them.
Look how banana-y
and
that
reaching out
looks.
to them and
That looks like
just
a banana
getting to
smoothie.
know them, because a lot of it is the fear of who
Oh,
is this teacher? Who
that looks
is
like
this
banana
educator,
chocolate
right?
milk.
And so I think by building that rapport with them, especially, I think it's a lot easier in elementary.
Hang on, we're going to talk about beer for a second. We need to talk about things that are important in life, and that's beer. That looks like a banana chocolate milk, doesn't it? Beer is amazing. Oh my God. That is delicious. It drinks like a smoothie. It is very thick. It's very milky. It tastes like it's like melted ice cream, but not totally melted ice cream, just melted enough so that it's like liquefied. And it definitely has banana and it definitely has chocolate. Really, really good. Really good. No, I cannot taste the alcohol at all. It's only 6%. And again, this is called Ice Cream Sour Ale and is from Branch Blade Brewing in Keene, New Hampshire. Shout out Branch Blade Brewing. Excellent, excellent ice cream sour. It doesn't taste sour either, to be honest. It tastes like creamy and smooth. No, I should not be campaigning. I should be here at happy hour. Thank you for your concern, person I've never seen at happy hour before. I was campaigning yesterday. Today is chill. It's Friday. It's Halloween. Fucking relax.
In secondary, just because you have one set of students or maybe two, right, as opposed to high school. But I think the professional development for the staff is key.
I should have a
before
beer
embarking on
drinking
this,
marathon for my
because
campaign.
You all need the tools,
Craft beer
and
night
the
at the Thirsty
language
Moose.
to be able
I would do
to
it.
teach the content, and then to be able to respond to students and to parents. So I think the professional development is really important. And I'll pass it on to Glenn.
I guess in the news, I hear about people afraid that their kids are going to feel bad when they hear their history or their role in history, and what, in particular, what the government did to my family, and that was based completely on racism. I have trouble feeling sympathy for someone who might have their feelings hurt because they feel guilty for what happened. I think we all need to face those things that we have done in the past. And I know that this is tough because you've got parents, you've got parent pressure, but I think you need administrators like Blanca there to have your back. So we just need more administrators
Blanca
like
is
Blanca,
critical.
because I know Blanca's an advocate for the teachers to be able to do what they do, and to do it in a way that gives you different perspectives, because history, what gets written in the books and what gets in the curriculum is driven by those who are in power, right? And oftentimes I think we need to figure out, how do we get those people in power to recognize different perspectives on history? Because in my years, I'm starting to be much more open to listening to different perspectives.
I am not going to be governor. Don't wish that on me, Gloria.
My trip to Washington, D.C. and going to the American Indian
Don't
Museum
wish that evil on
opened
me,
my
Gloria.
eyes to a lot of the history of what happened to the Native Americans in the United States, and it was all driven by the government. And so I think it's kids want to learn. Kids need to learn in diverse ways, and they need to. I think you as educators, you're the front line of teaching that, and you need to push your administrators, and your administrators need to be educated so that they can support you in that, in teaching that history.
So whipped.
And I think we need to work on making sure that the curriculum
This
is much
poor
more balanced
guy.
in how we how we present American history, so it just doesn't show that, you know, we've always done things the right way, because we haven't always done things the right way. We've done many, we learn from our mistakes.
We have done things
and
wrong.
I think if we don't teach where our mistakes were, then
we are been
as the
wronged.
saying goes, we're destined to repeat it. So I think we really need to focus on how do we
No,
show
that's not the point
a
at
broad
all.
perspective of history.
Tell me
and
you've never
different
watched my
versions of
channel
history
without
in the
telling
same
me you've never
event,
watched my channel.
from a
That's not the
different
point at all.
perspective. So I encourage all of you as new educators to go out there and do that. I know it's hard, but the hard things are often the most important things that we do, are the hard things. Do we pass it off to, did Tyler weighed in on this one already? Oh, Aisha, I'm sure you have something to say.
Thank you so much. I definitely, I think we all really tend to defer to the experienced educator in the room, Blanca. I don't even know what to say to follow up everyone's amazing comments, except for that I think I love that what you're allowed to teach is history in the classroom, because that's truly a thing where just by including other people's history, you give them a voice and you speak to something that really matters to other people in the room. And even in our subcultures, right, we have different levels of discrimination or leaving out people's story. And it really took a while for the LGBTQ plus community to come out and talk about how the people who started Stonewall were trans women of color. Like, it took us
Oh God,
forever to
that's
really
a
talk about the original
lie.
queens of Stonewall, the mothers of like
That is
the
not real
LGBTQ
history. That
plus
is a
revolution.
lie.
Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. Like, I want to grow up in a world where people know about Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. I want to grow up in a world where people are educated about Muslim explorers who just explored the world and conquered nothing, just said hi and did some trading. Like,
yes, Muslims are truly the
among all of
innocent ones in the
teach
world.
in history, that
No offense
you
to
touch
Muslims. I don't
on the
think all Muslims are bad or
similarities,
anything. Like,
among
believe whatever
all
you
different
believe, but
faiths. I
come
definitely
on.
was not taught that when I was young,
Muslims are not
and
innocents
ironically
in the
became
in world
Muslim
history. Come
when
on.
I, as a very opinionated young person, debated some Muslims. And I don't know if I won or lost that, but I guess I ended up in a place that I'm very happy with myself. And if we would just teach that aspect of history, I think that could save a lot of time and trouble. I don't know. I love to be on panels, interfaith panels, LGBTQ plus panels, but I'm often stuck talking about how, you know, surprise, Muslims love Jesus, or like, I choose what I wear. And those kinds of things can be easily, at least some of those misconceptions can be easily, people can be sort of stripped of their misconceptions if they see heroes in the world who already have those things, who, you know, that's why I love to see comic books that feature
If you don't want to be on
Marvel.
panels, don't
She's
agree to be on panels. You are under no
Muslim
obligation to be on a fucking
Pakistani
panel.
superhero. You know, the more we see a diverse group of people, the less likely we are to just generalize based on one tiny little
These people are such perpetual
story that
victims.
we hear
They
over
forced
and
me to
over
be
and
on
over.
panels. No, they didn't.
And I guess lastly, I hope that whenever it comes to, if your school honors holidays and you ever, even if you don't have a single Muslim in the class, I hope you let people know about Eid and Ramadan. I hope you let people know about really awesome holidays like Diwali in the Hindu faith. I hope that you just take every chance to expand their horizon and know more about the world, because it makes it so much more of an interesting place than just learning from this tiny viewpoint. And I think I'm really proud of people like Rob, who worked on the LGBTQ plus curriculum in the state, and Blanca, thank you so much for supporting your teachers as they teach that. It makes a huge difference, particularly to LGBTQ plus kids, to see themselves like reflected in that. Thanks. Sorry, I don't know how to deal with difficult parents. I think that's why I'm not a teacher. But I love teachers, and you're the future.
All right, so the
Such
next
a
question
true
is, what would
believer.
you like to have seen in the curriculum when you were a student? And what recommendations do you have about how race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation should be included in the curriculum?
I think I kind of alluded to it So definitely more local history, reflective of the people in the community. So for example, in my case, just about the Bracero program, right? Like there were so many people in California that a lot of Mexican workers who came and helped with the development and helped with the economics to lift this country, right? And so learning about that. Now with the Watsonville canning strike in the mid 80s, you know, this was led by many women of color, Filipino, Mexican women who were, you know, fighting for their rights. And it's very appropriate. It's Women's History Month, right? So this would be a great story to tell this month. Um, and so I would have liked to have seen more things like reflected, a history reflective of the community that is in the classrooms. And the second part to the question was,
It was, what recommendations do you have about how race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation should be included in the curriculum?
so I will share, I think as I walked in, Rob was sharing like the social justice standards, right, that can be integrated into the curriculum. So I think that's definitely one way. The other way is as you're integrating and looking at topics, all these topics can be integrated, but what you need to do is make sure you give teachers time to look at the different standards so that they are integrated. So for example, in our district, every summer we give teachers an opportunity to come together for 1 week, and we call it our CIA week, Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Week, where they take a look at their scope and sequence, and we pay them to come in and look at what worked and what didn't work. And then this year, for example, we're trying to figure out how do we integrate SEL
Oh
into
God,
the curriculum.
no,
In middle school
no,
and high school is a little
don't
bit
do it.
more challenging than perhaps at the elementary school. So how
Why
do
you
we
need to be
integrate
on the
SEL
lookout
in
for
mathematics? And
SEL.
we just, we're getting
Oh
ready
yeah,
to
learning for
launch
justice is
that series
crazy.
of PD, but you need time. So I think by the schools or the district having the commitment to give teachers time to be able to do that work, because it's time consuming and you need to be really thoughtful. So whether it's hiring a consultant to come in to help the teachers do that, if there aren't like teachers on special assignment that can lead that work, hiring a consultant that can come and do that, because there are
Oh
standards out there like the social justice standards.
my God. So I just went, just for shits and giggles, this has nothing to do with the stream. I just went and perused the Horde's Twitter to see if anyone was hate watching me, to watch me gossip about how much that content house is like high school. The Horde is advising the woman who had physically assaulted me yesterday to sue me for defamation. So even though this woman physically assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses, shoved a megaphone into my mouth, hitting me right here, like right in the front teeth. Hopefully nothing happens and my teeth are okay. The Horde on Twitter is advising her to sue me for defamation. These people are so fucking pathetic. I cannot even. Anyway.
And there's the frameworks that include so many different histories, but I think it's the time that people need to be able to put this together. So that would be my recommendation.
I'll jump.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so lots of things weren't taught. You know, I think of the classic example that perhaps comes to a lot of our minds, which is when Europeans came to the Americas and the effect that it had on Native Americans. I mean, we did like a play where it's like Thanksgiving and let's all sit down together, right? It's crazy. And this is still going on today. Like this is still happening. And so I think for us to think about like, how do we connect this to today and how it affects groups of people today, right? So like creating a space to like reflect on this history and see its impact and how it has changed the way that groups of people live and exist in today's society. So I think it's important to say that, you know, upwards of 90% of Native Americans were wiped out by measles, smallpox, the flu, things that they weren't exposed to. Never mind how many were killed through battles in fights and land grabs of native land. So I think that's a good example. I think of, you know, African American history. I just a couple months ago I read the 1619 Project, which is a
Oh
great
my
book.
God.
I encourage all to read that. But again, I think
It's just true history,
it
guys.
would be
They're
interesting to
just
have a
teaching true
conversation
history,
of
even though it's
beyond
been
just saying
debunked. It's
slave,
just true
you know,
history.
Africans were brought on slave ships to the United
It's
States, and
racist.
they were,
Anyone who
you know, they were
debunks the
slaves, and it
1619
was
Project is
wrong, and,
racist.
you know, kind of just generally that message. It would be interesting to have a conversation around like the 13th Amendment and like seeing how slavery transitioned into this other thing and how that has an impact on today's society. So I think, you know, these are just, I think, some examples. I think the point that I'm making is like somehow giving it the context of how is it relevant for today, and like maybe describing how we're still struggling with handling some of these conflicts in today's society. And then the second part, race, privilege. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. I'll stop there and I'll pass it to Glenn.
As I think about how history is taught in our schools, we teach history the way we were taught history. And I think the key is to really, and so as a result, I think we have a lot of blind spots. Each of us has our own blind spots. My son is one who has helped me to look into my blind spots. He's through this pandemic, is one of the blessings has been he's given me a reading list. Whenever I finish a book, he gives me another book to read about different social justice issues. He's my social justice guider getting through this. So I think as educators, each of you has blind spots that I think we need to explore. And I think that requires some curiosity on your part to learn.
He's reading the script his wife gave him.
Some of you may have never heard the story of internment camps that you heard from me today.
We've heard the story. We were taught it in
plenty
schools.
Of books out there about
We've heard the
and
story.
think,
we were taught it in schools.
Encourage our educators to expand their knowledge and look at their blind spots to figure out how do we teach history from a different perspective, or from more perspectives than just the one we've traditionally learned from. And I'll pass that on to Aisha. I think she gets another shot at this one.
This is true. It's a subject I care so much about, how we present things in history, because I would like to see no more whitewashed history, not just being told from that perspective, and definitely not all of sort of the mistellings that I grew up hearing. I would love to see people talk about diverse leaders. Like in the Muslim world, how did I take my entire life without not learning about an amazing traveler called Ibn al-Arabi, who wrote all of these books, traveled the world. You know, there are amazing explorers from China who went all the way around the world and went to the West Coast long before white people even settled on the East Coast. A very famous traveler called Zhang Xi, and he was a Muslim also. You know, there's so many people in history that if you just
that
highlight
could be legit.
them
I'm gonna throw her a bone.
Class,
that could be
legit. Bringing
legit.
so much more knowledge to folks and really helping to round out their education, even with young kids. But I think when it comes to older kids, that showing these diverse leaders really matters, because it's also how young people see themselves, like the chances that they see that they can be a leader, or that they can join their other colleagues and also see themselves as someone who could be anything that they want, a doctor, a lawyer, economist. And finally, I guess I would suggest that when Glenn talked about looking at our own biases, one thing that I realize a lot is sort of that how much language really matters when we refer to people, places, or things, like toning down our use of words like crazy or lame, right?
I will
Which
never
it
tone
turns
down
out is
my use of the term
ableist,
crazy.
or really
It-
being
For
thoughtful
example,
about our words
you
can
are
make a huge
fucking
difference to
crazy.
young people, not glossing over things, and just remembering that in your own way, just because you're there standing in front of them, you are like a leader to them. So even if they don't necessarily agree with you, your opinion does matter, and you've given them something else to think about throughout their lives. The teachers that mattered to me most in my life were probably ones who
Weren't
were my
white.
teachers in a time when I was going through a lot of depression, or when I didn't have friends, and they took the time out to care about me and what I was going through on the side of teaching a history class, or you know, when I found out my peers didn't like me anymore because my dad was gay, and they were like, that's okay, you're still the same person. Everything that you do in class really matters, and will carry with these young people for a long time. Thank you so much for being in a class like Rob's, where we talk about these things and we really get there and discuss difficult subjects. Also, speaking of difficult subjects, why did no one teach me about Reconstruction? You know, the part after the Civil War where suddenly African Americans from the South are being hugely elected to Congress, and then everybody who's a racist gets really salty about it, takes them all out of power, and then basically that's the rise of the Klan, that's the rise of controlling people through race. Because it was an uncomfortable subject, I think, where I grew up with, no one taught me that. I'm sure there's ways to teach that aren't harmful and aren't hurtful, but perhaps when you're going through that section of history, you just tell the story of some famous, you know, politician at that time who wasn't a politician for long enough, or just recognizing that as white folks, we have a whole lot of privilege, and that includes when we say things like women make 81 cents on the dollar compared to white men, when that's not true. That's white women. Like women who are, and people of color, are making a lot less than that. Like for Latinas, it's still less than 60 cents on the dollar for white men. So just kind of keeping those kinds of things in context, and really making sure that we're doing our best to represent a whole swath of people, and not buttonholing people. Like, apparently it is really hurtful to a lot of people I've known in my life when they meet a tall African-American person and they tell them they look like a basketball player. Like, just tell everyone they look like an economist or a doctor or a
Why
lawyer
is that
or a
offensive?
teacher.
Basketball
I
players
think you
make a
will have
ton of
come
money and are
a
really
long way in
considered to be
helping support
successful
people
in the
to just
world.
be
Why
like
is
their
that
true selves
offensive?
and see themselves as
That makes
someone
no
who can succeed.
sense.
Thanks for listening to my opinion.
Why would that be
I just wanted to
offensive?
throw one quick thing out that Glenn made me think about. I think it's also important to admit that you've learned something from your students, right? Like that opportunity for them to see that you're still learning and growing too kind of gets them in the mindset that they could be lifelong learners.
Stunning and brave.
Okay.
These
next
people are
question,
not addressing
this
the
is from
topic at all.
The check-in document I did for my section. There are some amazing questions in here, and a lot of the questions you've touched on. So thank you all for being so thorough with what you've been sharing. There's one in here that just really stood out, and I'm going to read the entire thing. It says, one question that I have about teaching about race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation in the history classroom is how can I create a safe space for all of my students in order to make them feel like they can express their thoughts, questions, and opinions?
Great question.
I think it's super important to build relationships with the students before you dive into those conversations. And so since day one in your classroom, whether it's giving them index cards, asking them 5 questions about themselves so that you get to know them. When I was a
Guys,
teacher, I
giving
would
an
like
index
to
card is going to
just kind of
solve
go in and check in, and if they
racism
said,
and
oh, like I just
bigotry.
had a
Just
baby
give the students an
sister, or
index
like I'm the
card to
oldest,
write
or
down their
whatever,
identity,
like
and
whatever
everything is
connection I
solved.
could make, whether it was they were into comics, whether whatever they were playing, they were an athlete.
All that's
I always
required
made
is
it a
an
point to try
index
to make that
card.
connection. And then if you have them in groups and you have those connecting activities with the student, and it's so important that as a teacher or the educator, you are vulnerable yourself. So I never asked a question of my students that I wasn't willing to answer myself, so that they got to know me and they saw me and my vulnerability, so that then they would feel comfortable. And once you build that relationship, you'd be surprised at how open they will be. But you can't have those conversations, and you can't. The other thing that I've also switched from is like moving away from the safe space to the brave space, because I don't
The
know that we're
brave
ever going to
space. I haven't
enter a
heard that
safe
before.
space entirely, but we can be in a brave space where we have the courage to speak our truth, and that we know that it's scary, but we also acknowledge that not everybody may agree, right? Because I think it's almost not true that we could enter 100% safe space, right? But we can enter that brave space. And so I think kind of switching that language too about creating a brave space in our classrooms and what that looks like is important. Relationships always first.
There's this piece, right? And this is my empathetic side, right? But there's this piece where it's like, I think about an experience that I had in the classroom where I was bullied on a classmate, and it was something like, oh, he's like a girl or something, right? And this is like in front of the whole class, right? And the teacher is like, Tommy, don't do that. That's inappropriate. Stop it. Kind of like, and that was it, right? And we moved on. And so part of this is like, well, people need to develop thick skin and like be able to deal with these kind of circumstances and situations, which to a certain extent is true, right? Like you need to be able to live and exist and figure out how to handle these situations when you're not in front of a teacher or a principal or something, right? So yes, that's true, but also the teacher not really doing anything about it also kind of makes it seem like it's okay. So I think setting those ground rule foundational rules is very, very important.
I think as teachers, it's really difficult to do, but to create that safe space in your classroom where you are advocates for all your students. It's really important, because all it takes is for a teacher to just make you feel bad once, and that student will feel unsafe in that environment and will probably not participate and probably not reach their full potential because they feel that they have been not respected, not valued as much as other people. I think it's a tough job. Being an educator is such a tough job. I watched my wife do it for 36 years. It's very tough, but it's the most important job that I can think of for our future. And creating that safe space where everyone feels welcomed and everyone feels supported, and having your eyes and ears and your heart open all the time to the sensitivity that someone's little comment may not mean much to you, but it could mean something a lot to some other student. So I think always having your radar up and aware of what's the dynamic of what's going on in your classroom. Who are the bullies in the classroom? Who are the kids who are really confident? Who are the kids who are shy?
He's not actually giving bad advice here.
Shy kids have a right to have their opinions too.
He's not giving bad advice. I feel so bad for this guy.
Creating that environment it's a hard thing to do, but that's a really important role.
Listen, I know that I can come across as a bitch. I understand that, and there are legitimately people that I do not have empathy for at all at this point. But guys like this, I just like, my heart bleeds for these guys. It's like, I feel like I understand them. I feel like they're really trying to be good people. And they have been told by the people in their lives that this is what they need to do to be good people. Like, there are legitimately bad people in the world. Many of the people who are legitimately bad in the world are fucking social justice warrior true believers, like that Muslim woman and the gay guy. Those are bad people. Those are legitimately bad people. This guy is not a bad person. Blanca is a little confused, but I don't think she's a bad person. But like, especially this guy, this older gentleman, I just, oh God, I just feel so bad. And it's like, he is one of those examples of like people who, I don't mean to sound condescending, because I was once confused as well. I am very familiar with not knowing what's going on in the world and trusting people that you shouldn't trust. I get it. But it's like, I want to help this guy so badly. I want to just like take him aside and have a conversation with him to be like, you know, like, the people that you're in with are not going to be the best people. They're not hinged into reality at all. It's not the best path. But I know his wife is just going to bring him right back because she's the true believer in the relationship. And it's just like, you can want desperately to help people sometimes, and sometimes you just can't do it because they don't want help. That's what I'm saying. And I want to encourage people, for as much as we make fun of these people, and I do think it's very well deserved to make fun of these people, just remember that it's okay to have empathy for the people who have been legitimately dragged into this bullshit. All right. Let's finish up, guys. We got about 5 more minutes of this presentation.
That you have is to be the advocate for every student in your classroom.
Rob, did you want to ask a question from your check-in document? I have another one, but I want to make sure that we're.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can ask your question and finish things out. That'd be great, Rebecca.
Okay. Well, the other one, I do have, and in my section, probably 2/3 of teacher candidates who are in kinder, first and second grade. So a lot of young students. So many asked, how can we really introduce these topics to our younger students? I know we've touched on this before.
There
but
it
if we
is.
could reiterate, how can we reach our younger students? That would be great.
So I am a big fan of conversations around pronouns.
Oh my God. Yes. Introduce pronouns in kindergarten.
Easy, concept
Great
to
idea.
understand from a very young age. And so I think just getting the little ones to understand, like, how do you identify? And I can guarantee you that there are kids that age that will identify using different gender pronouns than people would assume. So I think creating that space to use gender pronouns, and I also think it's a space, particularly for, if we're talking specifically about LGBTQ related issues, it's helpful to get them to learn about like what those different letters mean. And there's more than just LGBTQ, right? That's why there's the plus at the end. So I think having some experiences where they can learn about what those different ways of being are is a great thing to do with children at that age.
I put in the chat 2 books that I introduced to my own children when they were that age. So I think through storytelling and books, you're able to introduce these concepts and topics. And yeah, and I agree with the gender pronouns too. But I think there's way to show that there's diversity in families, so that all students kind of can see themselves in those stories.
This is my lovely wife, Kathy. She's the one who is teaching for 36 years. And she's been listening from downstairs. So she wants to hear what the conversation is going on here, that we do this every once in a while. But, at that young age, I think kids kids are more accepting of one another at that age. And if we could just keep that going, somehow they learn because we teach them how to discriminate against other people, and they learn values from other people. But my experience with little kids is little kids they're more accepting than anyone. They're even accepting of me. So I think it's just to nurture that environment and to keep kids just thinking about one another and being sensitive and caring for one another.
I always learn so much from you all. Thank you, Rob, for giving me a chance to come on here. And I think this is a great time to note that it's always also okay to say if you were wrong about something or if you said something wrong. Speaking of which, Ibn al-Arabi is a famous Sufi poet, and Ibn Battuta, whose name I also listed there, is the famous traveler. So forgive my misspoken moment there, friends.
So on behalf of all of us, I'll just thank you again for all that you've presented. And our class is going to go on a little. I'm going to stop the recording.
Oh, no. Oh, I guess that's it for happy hour. I guess that's it. Well, I feel really bad, guys, because I was really hoping that class would actually be the title of what that class was. And apparently it wasn't. Apparently it was just lived experiences. But I suppose it's okay for us to know that. Well, guys, that was happy hour. Now I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave you with too much consternation. So I do want to give you a highlight that you can take with you. Elon Musk tweeted a couple hours ago, anyone suspended for minor and dubious infractions will be freed from Twitter jail. That means, folks, James Lindsay's coming back. James Lindsay's coming back. You know James Lindsay's coming back. I can't fucking wait for James Lindsay to come back. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited that Elon Musk has completed the purchase of Twitter. It means that I will never be permanently banned again on Twitter. I'm really excited about that. Like, he's apparently formed some sort of content moderation council, which of course the lefties are, they're upset about. They're like, isn't it funny that the leftists on Twitter are like, Elon Musk forming a content moderation council is Orwellian. Oh, really, lefties? Oh, really? Why don't you go build your own platform? So I'm really looking forward to Twitter hopefully getting more fun in the coming days. Twitter used to be great, man. Used to be great. Then it sucked for a while. Then I got permanently banned for a month, and then it really sucked. And then I came back, but it still sucked. But hopefully Twitter becomes great again now that Elon Musk has taken over. All right, guys, programming note. I don't know if I'm going to do Socialism Saturday tomorrow. If I do, it's going to be an afternoon Socialism Saturday because I'm going to a Halloween party tomorrow night. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I have to take the night off, okay? Sometimes when you have a costume that includes a crown, you just have to go wear it to a Halloween party, and that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. So if I do Socialism Saturday tomorrow, it will be an afternoon affair. It'll be a little bit calmer, not quite as boisterous as our evening Socialism Saturdays. But I will let you guys know. Please make sure you follow me on Locals, on Twitter, all the different places, and I will. Yes, King Peter of the chat. Make Twitter orange again. Exactly. Guys, I will try to find a much more eventful happy hour for next week. The last couple have been lackluster, haven't they? I feel like we need to do a throwback. I feel like the woke left have started to understand that we're watching their stuff and they can't say crazy shit on the internet anymore. I feel like we need to do a throwback for our next happy hour. Watch something really crazy from 7 years ago before they understood that we were going to watch their stuff and they can't say crazy shit anymore. Because happy hour lately, maybe I'm just getting desensitized by socialism. It's entirely possible. I've been watching a lot of socialism lately. Maybe I'm just getting desensitized. Maybe these happy hours don't seem as extreme to me anymore as they once did. but I'm going to try to find a good one for next week. We do happy hours at Friday on Friday at 5 o'clock. There we go. That's the beer talking. Cheers. We do happy hours on Friday at 5 o'clock. I do drink beer and do commentary. Next week, please don't make me drink an 8.3 alcohol content beer at the top of the show, because I'll probably be a lot more coherent if I'm not drinking the 8.3% alcohol content beer at the very beginning. Yeah, maybe we'll do some Amaze videos. Socialism is crazy. All right, guys, I'm going to go head out and spend the rest of the night with my husband. And we're going to have fun. Probably sitting on the couch watching TV as we do. But guys, have a great weekend. Happy Halloween to everyone. And remember, guys, we do have movie night on Sunday. Hang on, let me show you. I made a whole promo and everything. Got to show off my promo. We have movie night on Sunday at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. If you want access to the supporter Discord, head over to activelyunwoke.com/support or unwokeinfo.com/support. It'll take you to the same place. We are watching Poltergeist. I haven't seen Poltergeist in years. I'm really looking forward to it. See you guys on Sunday at 8 p.m., possibly tomorrow for Socialism Saturday on my main channel. You know, maybe around noon, 1, 2 p.m.-ish, something like that. Maybe I'll even wear a crown. Who knows? I might be in costume. All right, guys, take care. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.